My YouTube channel was hijacked and then it was terminated. For 3 days and 3 hours, I had no idea whether I'd ever get it back again. 6 years of videos, thousands of hours of work gone. What followed was a roller coaster of panic, hope, frustration and relief. I documented every step, every email, took screenshots of everything. Here is the complete story of how I got my channel back. So where did this whole nightmare begin? Well, it began with an email. And the frustrating thing is that at the time there was absolutely nothing about it that immediately screamed scam. Like most creators, I receive emails all the time. Sponsorship offers, partnership proposals, product reviews from software companies, camera companies, drone companies, AI companies. Most of them go nowhere. But some are genuine, and I've engaged with some of those and I've accepted some of the offers. This one just appeared to be another business inquiry. The company mentioned in the email was Claude AI. That's a name that most people watching this video will probably recognise. The email was professionally written, the English was good, there were no obvious spelling mistakes, there was no Nigerian prince promising me millions, there was no flashing warning sign, there was nothing that immediately made me think I was dealing with criminals this time. So I did what I always do. I read it, I checked it, looked to see where it come from, and after looking it over and it looked legitimate, I replied, yes, I would be interested. At that point, I wasn't thinking about security and I wasn't thinking about hackers. Certainly wasn't thinking about losing my YouTube channel. As far as I was concerned, I was just responding to another potential collaboration inquiry. And that's an important point because looking back with hindsight is easy. At the time, it felt normal, routine, just another day. So, after I said I'd be interested, a second email arrived. Again, nothing immediately jumped out at me. In fact, something very important needs to be mentioned here. You can now see a large red warning banner attached to this email. But that warning wasn't there when I received the email. And that's important because if that warning had been there from the start, this story might have gone very differently. The warning only appeared later, long after events were already unfolding, and possibly even after the recovery process had already started. At the time I was reading the email, it looked completely normal. So I followed the instructions. I clicked the link. The page that opened looked legitimate, professional, well designed. It appeared to be part of a creator onboarding process, the sort of thing you'd expect if a company wanted to verify that they were dealing with the owner of the YouTube channel they were interested in working with. I started filling the information in the form, and again, nothing felt obviously wrong. I wasn't being asked for passwords. I wasn't being asked for credit card details. I wasn't being asked to hand over my channel or any part of control of it. Everything seemed to fit the story that always happens when a company contacts me for some kind of deal. So I continued. And then something happened. The page froze completely. At first I thought it was just a technical problem, a browser issue or a website issue, maybe my internet connection. But within seconds another thought entered my head, a much darker, worrying thought. What if this isn't a technical problem? What if I've just made a very serious mistake? And I can still remember that feeling, the sudden drop in the pit of my stomach. The moment when my brain started rapidly replaying every decision about this email that I've just made. What did I click? What information did I enter? What exactly is this page? What have I just done? At that point, I didn't know whether anything had actually happened. I didn't know if my account was compromised. I didn't know if my channel was at risk. All I knew was that something suddenly felt wrong. And that feeling was made much worse by the fact that I take security very seriously. I had two-factor authentication enabled, I had recovery email addresses configured, I had recovery phone numbers configured, I had passkeys installed in my computer. I had the protections that were constantly told to use. So if something bad really was happening, I couldn't immediately understand how. What I didn't know at that moment was that this was only the beginning. At this point, I still didn't know whether I had a problem. I had a bad feeling, but a bad feeling isn't evidence. So I decided to check the one thing that would tell me whether everything was okay. My YouTube studio. I already had a tab open, so I clicked back to that tab. And immediately I knew something was wrong, very wrong. The page that had been my YouTube studio only moments earlier was gone. Instead, I was looking at a message telling me that I didn't have access to the account. At first I thought this must be some kind of error, a session timeout, a browser problem, something temporary. So I tried logging in. And that's when things started moving very quickly. I entered my password, incorrect password. I must have mistyped. I tried again, incorrect password. Now I wasn't confused anymore, I was worried. Because I knew my password, I hadn't forgotten it. And if Google was telling me my password was wrong, there were really only two possibilities. Either I was mistyping or somebody had changed it. Then my phone started going crazy. Notification after notification, emails arriving, security warnings, recovery emails, alerts about unusual activity. I remember trying to read them as they arrived, while at the same time trying to regain access to the account. Every new email seemed to make the situation worse. And then something happened that removed any remaining doubt that I had. Google automatically signed me out from everything. Gmail accounts, Google services, the lot. Suddenly, I was on the outside looking in. At this point, I knew this wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a browser problem. This wasn't a website freezing. My account was actively being secured, modified, or controlled by someone. I just didn't know who. Was it Google? Was it the attackers? Was it some automated security process? I had no idea. What I did know was that I could no longer get in. So I started the recovery process, and thankfully, because I was already documenting everything, I took screenshots of every single step, every page, every prompt, every warning, every dead end. I couldn't get in using my password, so I clicked try another way. That didn't work. I clicked try another way again, then another way, then another. And this is where the panic really started building, because Google began showing me fragments of the recovery information attached to my account. Recovery email addresses and recovery phone numbers. Just enough characters to identify them, but not enough to see the full details. And I didn't recognise them. I didn't recognise the email addresses. I didn't recognise the phone numbers. And I certainly hadn't added them. And in that moment, everything suddenly became real. This wasn't someone trying to get into my account. Someone was already in my account. They had changed things, critical things, the very recovery methods that I would normally use to get back in. That's when the real panic started, because up till now I thought I might have a problem. Now I knew I had a problem. The question was no longer, has my account been compromised? The question had become, how much control do they have? And I was about to find out. So at this point I knew I had a serious problem. The email account that I used to sign into my YouTube studio had been compromised. I couldn't access YouTube Studio. I couldn't access the Gmail account. The recovery information had been changed to details I didn't recognise. What had started out as a routine business inquiry had turned into something much bigger. My immediate instinct was to go to Google and search for help. Like most people, I assumed there would be a simple one-step process. There's a hacked account, there'll be a support form, there'll be a recovery procedure. Fix the account, get access back, and everything returns to normal. That was my assumption. It turned out to be completely wrong. What I didn't understand at the time was that I was actually dealing with two separate problems. The first problem was my Google account. The second problem was my YouTube channel. They're connected, but when things go badly wrong, they're treated as separate recovery processes. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I had lost access to everything and needed help fast. So I started searching Google support pages. At this stage, my thinking was fairly simple. Find the official recovery process and follow the instructions. Then I'll get my account back. By now, I had accepted that I wasn't going to be able to solve this myself. I needed help from YouTube. Fortunately, I have another YouTube channel. That channel was still accessible, and because both channels were connected through the same AdSense account, I hoped that would be enough to get me in front of a human being. So I logged in using that channel and navigated to creator support. At this point, I was feeling a strange mix of panic and optimism. Panic because my main channel appeared to be disappearing in front of me, and optimism because surely this was exactly the kind of situation that support staff deal with every day. A channel has been hacked, the owner can't access it, support verifies ownership, problem solved. At least that's what I expected. I opened a live chat session and was connected to someone called Aya. My first thought was that I was probably talking to an automated system, a chatbot, something designed to gather information before passing me to a real human support agent. So I explained what happened. I explained that my channel had been compromised. I explained that I no longer had access. I explained that my recovery details had been changed. I explained that I was contacting them from a second channel because I couldn't access the main one. And then the conversation started going in circles. Aya repeatedly explained that support could only discuss the issue with the owner of the affected account. On paper, that sounds reasonable. The problem was that I was the owner. The whole reason I was contacting support was because I'd been locked out. The requirement that they needed seemed impossible. To get help, I needed access to the account, but I was seeking help because I didn't have access to the account. It felt like being told, we can help you get through that locked door, but first you'll need to go through the locked door. The more the conversation continued, the more frustrated I became. I kept trying to explain the situation from different angles. The account had been compromised, the recovery methods had been changed, I couldn't sign in, that's why I was there. But the answer never really changed. As far as I was concerned, I needed to contact support from the very account that had been taken away from me. Eventually, Aya terminated the chat. There was no escalation, no breakthrough, no solution. Just advice that required me to do the one thing that I was physically unable to do. For a brief moment, that was probably one of the lowest points in the entire recovery process. Not because the channel had been hacked, I already knew that, but because my first attempt to get help had led absolutely nowhere. The reality was beginning to sink in. Getting the channel back might not be quick, and it might not be easy. It certainly wasn't going to happen just because I explained the situation to support. I was going to have to find another way. At this point, I think I did something that probably surprised me more than anyone else. I stopped fighting, not permanently, but I stopped actively fighting the situation for a short while. Partly because I'd hit a dead end, partly because I wanted to speak to a couple of friends, and partly because I was hoping that if I stepped away from the problem for a few hours, my subconscious might come up with something that I'd missed. But something else started happening during that time, something I hadn't expected. I started preparing myself for the possibility that I might never get the channel back. And that's a strange place to find yourself after 6 years. For 6 years I'd been creating videos, travelling, filming, editing, uploading, building an audience, replying to comments, learning new skills, improving my storytelling skills, improving my filming and my editing. And suddenly I found myself asking a question I'd never seriously considered before. What if it's gone? Not temporarily, gone forever. What do I do then? Do I take my second channel and rebrand it into Windswept Robert? Do I start a completely new Windswept Robert channel from scratch? Do I walk away from drones and YouTube entirely? Do I create something completely different? Would that be a disaster, or would it be an opportunity? These weren't questions I wanted to be asking, but these were the questions I found myself asking. And then my thinking took another unexpected turn. I started looking at the numbers, not subscriber numbers, not views, but the economics. I started estimating how many hours I'd put into the channel over 6 years, filming, travelling, editing, researching, uploading, answering comments, everything. And then I compared that to the money that the channel had actually generated. And when I did the calculation, the answer surprised me. The effective hourly rate was somewhere around £1.50. Now, don't misunderstand me. I wasn't making videos because of the money. If I was doing it for the money, I'd have stopped years ago. The channel was a passion project, a hobby, a creative outlet, a reason to get out and explore. But the calculation forced me to confront something. The channel had never really made financial sense. For 6 years I'd been putting more into it than I was getting back, financially at least. And there was no evidence that that was about to change. Not next month, not next year, probably not ever. And strangely, I found that thought calming. Because for the first time since the hijack, I stopped thinking about what I was losing and started thinking about what options I had. Maybe I'd start again. Maybe I'd use another channel. Maybe I'd create something entirely new. Maybe losing the channel wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was the start of a different one. Now, don't get me wrong, I still wanted the channel back, desperately. But something had changed. The panic was beginning to fade, not because the situation had improved, but because I was beginning to accept the possibility that it might not. And once you start accepting that possibility, something interesting happens. You begin thinking more clearly and less emotionally, more strategically, which turned out to be important because the next breakthrough was finally approaching. After a couple of days, I decided I'll try creator support again. To be honest, I wasn't particularly optimistic. My previous attempt hadn't achieved very much, and at that point, I'd already spent days dealing with dead ends, recovery failures, and conflicting information. But I still had access to my second YouTube channel. So I logged in once again and opened another support chat. This time I was connected to someone called Ali. And almost immediately, the conversation felt different. I explained everything again: the channel, the Google account, the changed recovery information, the changed recovery phone numbers, the backup codes, the passkeys that had been removed. The fact that I no longer controlled any of the recovery methods, that's what I explained. By this point, I must have explained the same story dozens of times. But unlike previous conversations, I got the feeling that Ali actually understood the situation. Not just that I'd forgotten a password or I was having trouble signing in, but that the account itself had been taken over. For the first time, I felt like I was talking to somebody who recognised that this was a genuine hijacking. After reviewing the case for a few minutes, about 10 minutes actually, Ali provided a link to a dedicated YouTube hijacking report form. Now that might not sound like much, but for me it felt enormous, because up until that point I'd mostly been going round in circles. This was the first time that someone had pointed me towards a process specifically designed for what had happened to me. A hijacked YouTube channel. Not a forgotten password, not a locked account, a hijacking. And psychologically, that was important, because for the first time in days, I felt as though I was making progress rather than simply documenting my own disaster. I clicked the link. I started filling in the forms. I gathered channel information, account details, evidence, anything that might help prove ownership. For the first time since the attack began, I felt like there might actually be a path back to my channel. Once Ali had pointed me towards the YouTube hijacking report form, the recovery process became much more methodical. Up until this point, most of what I'd been doing was reacting, trying to understand what had happened, trying to regain access, trying to find somebody who could actually help. Now, for the first time, it felt as though I was participating in an actual recovery process. The form asked a surprising number of questions, and as I worked through them, it became obvious what YouTube was trying to do. They weren't simply asking whether I knew the channel. They were trying to establish whether I was the genuine owner. They were asking questions about my devices, questions about my internet connection, questions about where I usually logged in from, questions about whether I used any other devices to ever log into my YouTube studio, questions about my address, the county I lived in, the country I lived in, questions about my videos. What was the name of the last video you uploaded? Questions about my AdSense account. Questions that individually might not prove much, but taken together would create a profile that only the real owner would be able to answer consistently. And thankfully, I could answer most of them. I knew exactly what devices I used, and I knew where I logged in from. I knew my upload history, I knew my workflow, I knew my AdSense information, and I knew the title of my most recently uploaded video. But then I hit a problem. The form wanted to know my channel ID, and I didn't know it. I knew my channel name and I knew my handle. I knew every video I'd uploaded, but I didn't know the actual channel ID. And more importantly, because I'd been locked out of the account, I couldn't simply log in and look it up. For a while I thought I was stuck. Then I remembered something. Although I couldn't access the channel as its owner, the channel still existed publicly on YouTube. So I opened an Incognito browser window and started searching for it as if I was a complete stranger. I searched for Windswept Robert and the VLOS rule nobody seems to understand, which happened to be the most recent video that I'd uploaded before the hijacking. Although the channel seemed to be gone, there was something in the URL window. It was long strings of letters and numbers. I had a suspicion that one of those strings might somehow relate to the channel ID. The problem was that I didn't know enough about YouTube's internal structure to be sure. So I asked ChatGPT. I fed in the information that I was seeing in the URL and asked ChatGPT whether the channel ID could be determined from this URL. To my surprise, the answer was yes. Within minutes, I had the correct channel ID for my Windswept Robert YouTube channel. I remember feeling absurdly pleased with myself, not because I'd recovered the channel, not because I'd solved the hijacking, but because for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, I'd actually solved one of the problems myself. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was actively building the evidence needed to prove ownership. So now I was armed with a channel ID, my AdSense information, my account details, my device history, and everything else that the form had asked. I technically had enough information to complete the form, but I decided that simply answering the questions wasn't enough. If YouTube was investigating whether the channel had genuinely been hacked, I wanted to make their job as easy as possible. The form allowed supporting files to be attached. So I started gathering evidence. Not assumptions, not theories, evidence. Over the previous 2 days, I'd been taking screenshots of almost everything that happened. At the time, I was doing it partly for my own records, but now those screenshots became invaluable. I compiled them into a PDF and I attached that PDF to the report form. The screenshots showed the security alert emails I'd received when the hijacking first began. They showed Google warning me about suspicious activity. They showed password changes that I hadn't made. They showed recovery email addresses that I didn't recognise. They showed recovery phone numbers that I'd never seen before. Details that clearly did not belong to me. I also included screenshots showing that a passkey had been removed from my account. That was particularly important because I hadn't removed it, someone else had. Now, taken individually, each screenshot might not have proved very much, but together they painted a very clear picture. This was not a forgotten password, and it wasn't someone getting confused about which account they were trying to log into. It wasn't a login problem, it was an account takeover. And for the first time, I felt as though I wasn't simply telling YouTube that I'd been hacked, I was showing them. The evidence was there. The timeline was there. The security alerts were there. The changes to the account were there. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The account had been compromised. So I attached the PDF, reviewed everything one final time, and submitted the report. It was as complete a recovery package as I could possibly make. At that point, there was nothing more I could add. The form had been submitted, the evidence had been provided, the questions had all been answered. And for the first time since I clicked that original phishing link, I felt that the recovery process was finally moving in the right direction. What I didn't know then was that YouTube's investigation was only just beginning. After submitting the evidence, there was very little I could do. The investigation had moved beyond me. The creator support team had the information, they had the screenshots and the timeline, they had the account details. Now all I could do was wait. Over the next few days, I received emails from the creator support team. These were very focused, very professional, very direct. They were not interested in how frustrated I was. They were not interested in how worried I was. They were investigating a hijacked account and they needed facts. So that's what I gave them. Every question they asked received a direct answer with no embellishment, no emotion. just the information they needed to move the investigation forward. Looking back, I think that was the right approach. At this stage, they weren't trying to comfort me. They were trying to determine ownership and recover the account. And gradually, the emails became more encouraging. The investigation was progressing. The case was moving forward. Then eventually, I received the email that I'd been hoping for. A recovery link. The opportunity to regain control of the account. I followed the instructions very carefully. I created a new password, a completely new recovery email address, a completely new recovery phone number, a new passkey. I re-enabled two-factor authentication. A verification code arrived on my phone, the recovery number I had just added. I entered it, and just like that, I was back in. After days of uncertainty, I finally had access to the Windswept Robert email account again. I remember feeling an enormous sense of relief. The recovery process had actually worked. The account was mine again. The hackers were out. The security details were mine. The recovery methods were mine. The password was mine. I genuinely thought the nightmare was over. And to be fair, part of it was. The Google account had been recovered. But what I didn't yet understand was something that I've mentioned earlier in this video. The Google account and the YouTube channel are not the same thing. They're connected, very closely connected, but they're not the same thing. And while I'd been fighting to recover the email account, something else had been happening in the background. Something I hadn't fully appreciated. The hijackers hadn't simply taken over the account, they'd been using it. During the time they controlled the channel, they had uploaded multiple live streams promoting a Bitcoin scam. Several live streams, all fraudulent, all uploaded using my channel. My subscribers were seeing them. My channel name was attached to them and my reputation was attached to them. And YouTube had noticed, quite rightly. Unfortunately, YouTube didn't know those live streams had been uploaded by criminals and not by me. As far as the system was concerned, they had been uploaded by my channel. And YouTube responded exactly as you would expect. The channel was terminated. Not the hacker's channel, my channel. 6 years of videos, 6 years of work, gone. I can still remember the feeling. A few minutes earlier, I thought I had won. I thought the recovery process was complete. I thought I'd reached the finish line. Then I discovered that although I'd recovered the account, the channel itself no longer existed. And suddenly I realised something. The battle I just won wasn't the final battle. It was only the first one. Fortunately, the second battle turned out to be much easier than the first. By this point, I had regained control of the Google account associated with my YouTube channel. That turned out to be incredibly important because now, for the first time since the hijacking began, I could contact creator support from the actual Windswept Robert account. No workarounds, no second channels, no explaining why I was contacting them from somewhere else. I was now the verified owner of the account once again. So I contacted creator support and explained the situation. My Google account had been recovered. My YouTube channel had been terminated because of the Bitcoin scam live streams uploaded by the hijackers. I needed the channel restored. To my surprise, the process was straightforward. Creator support immediately directed me to the channel hijacking recovery procedure. In fact, the same one that I had previously used to recover my hijacked email account. And much of it, in fact, all of it, looked very familiar. It was the same questions that I had already answered about my devices, locations, IP addresses, recent uploads, channel details. The same information designed to verify ownership. And because I'd already gone through all of this during the Google account recovery process, completing the form was easy. I completed it, submitted everything, and waited. This time the wait wasn't measured in days, it was measured in hours. Then the email arrived, the one I'd been hoping to see. My YouTube channel had been restored. Just like that, Windswept Robert was back. The videos were there, the branding was there, the subscribers were there, the comments were there. The channel I'd spent 6 years building had survived, and everything that had happened felt almost surreal. A few days earlier, I'd been locked out. The recovery information had been changed, the password had been changed, the channel had been hijacked, the account had been compromised, the channel had then been terminated, and now, somehow, everything was back. Today, as I record this video, I've got full control of my Gmail accounts and my YouTube channel. Full control. All of the videos are back and the branding is there. The security settings have been reviewed. The recovery methods belong to me. The channel's back. The recovery is complete. Now, before I finish, there's one final screenshot I'd like to show you. The spike on the left is the hijacking. It's the Bitcoin live streams, the content that should never have been on the channel. The content that ultimately led to the channel being terminated. Then everything goes quiet because the channel disappeared. The recovery process begins. Days of emails, forms, screenshots waiting. And then this second spike, the one on the right, appears. That's my VLOS video. The first video that went public after the channel was restored. And for some reason, I find that strangely satisfying. Not because of the view count and not because of the watch time, but because it represents something. The first spike wasn't me. The second one was. The first spike represents the hijackers briefly taking control of the channel. The second spike represents me getting it back. And when I look at this graph now, I don't really see the analytics. I see the entire story condensed into this one image. Over the last few days, I've received messages from other creators, friends and viewers asking questions about what happened, where is your channel going? Rather than trying to answer all of those questions individually in the comments, I'm planning to do a live stream shortly after this video goes live. There won't be a fixed agenda and there won't be a presentation. It will simply be an opportunity to talk about the experience, discuss the recovery process with you and answer any questions that you might have. If you've been through something similar yourself, or if you're worried that something similar might happen to you, I'd love to hear from you in the live stream. And unlike most of my live streams that I've done before, I won't be setting a time limit on this one. I'll stay live until everyone who wants to ask a question has had the opportunity to do so. So if there's something I haven't covered in this video, or if you'd like more detail about any part of the recovery process, keep an eye on the channel for the live stream announcement. Hopefully I'll see some of you there.